Om Wage Jware Mum Wage Jware Mum 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 Om Wage
Good morning to everyone and good evening for those of you who are in Asia. So we will start the second part of a two-part program on practicing the 8th chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara. So we will begin first with the opening recitations. Basically, the opening recitations that we do, if we were doing it in Tibetan, it would be the same. But in English, there are numerous possibilities in terms of translations, both good and bad, in that the more translations, the more nuances you can get. Bad if you are a creature of habit, and then you're like, I like this, I don't like that. but it is what it is. We don't have Dharma kings, dictating that it should only be translated this way or that way, or only this group is sanctioned and that group is not. So then there is a variety of translations. But as the four reliances say, rely on the meaning and not on the words. So especially now that we're meeting in Zoom, it matters not that much that we have exactly the same words in English. If we were all sitting in the same room physically, then it's a little distracting if different people are saying different things. But now in Zoom, you are in your homes, you are in your own space. You can contemplate the meaning of the words. You can say along, but basically the meaning is the same. The words might be different. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious Bodhi. Thus, until I achieve Buddha, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. By the way, this opening recitation, which is the aspiration and engagement bodhicitta, which in a way you could say summarizes the 10 chapters of Shantideva. The 10 chapters of Shantideva is all about aspiration and engagement bodhicitta. The specific words that we have, that we now commonly use to open all our practices in Drikung Kagyu. These words came from the founder, Kyopa Jigten Sungden. Then again, to point out my point, to reiterate my point about different words being used, if you look throughout the 12 volumes of Kyopa Rinpoche's collected works, there are versions of what we just said. So even in Tibetan, he gave them variously, slightly one word more, one word less, to different people on different occasions. For me, what I can surmise from that, of course, this is my own kind of conclusion. You can investigate this further. What I can surmise from that is that at least during Kyopa Rinpoche's time in the 12th century, there was not so much emphasis on liturgical aspects of the practice, meaning they were not so invested. He was not so concerned about everybody chanting the same thing, everybody, chanting a certain style, and, it's all beautifully executed, and it's so impressive and so inspiring. Kyopa Rinpoche fundamentally was a yogi. Yogi here means one who cultivates his mind. In the West, the word yogi in Tibetan Buddhist circles has connotations of these long-haired wild guys running around with or without vows. But that's not how this word is used in the tradition. Yeah? Yogi denotes someone who is primarily in retreat and doing very intense meditation. So Kyoba Rinpoche was basically such a person, such a character, and so he did not emphasize much the need to perform, extensive rituals, impressive rituals, and all of that. I'm not saying that those things are not important. I'm just pointing out the early characteristics of this community, and the early Kagyupas, I would say. So it's probably not unique to Kyoba Rinpoche, but those who were disciples and grand disciples of Gampopa. There is clearly a certain style of practice, a certain characteristic, because we have contemporaneous accounts, other people writing about them and to some degree criticizing them and saying, oh, they're not doing things the proper way. But if you look from within the early Kagyupas, what they're saying is, we are interested in changing the mind. We are interested in dealing with, what's at the heart of the matter. Yeah, so anyway, that was the opening recitations of Bodhicitta, aspiration and engagement, and they are the words of Kyoba Rinpoche. What follows is the Refuge Recitation. Now this Refuge Recitation comes from Atisha. Atisha is one of the key figures of bringing the Buddha Dharma from South Asia, from India, particularly from Bengal, which is where he was from. He was one of the key figures to bring Buddhism to India. In terms of influence of Indian masters on Tibetan Buddhism, I would say Bhima-sambhava's influence and Atisha's influence are unmatched. So Atisha is a key figure, particularly for the Dakpo Kagyupas, meaning Gampopa and spiritual descendants. Atisha's position is very central. Even though these days in our standard Kagyu lineage prayers, Atisha's name is doesn't turn up explicitly, because the way lineage prayers are designed, set up, is more or less every generation just one name. So they don't name like 3 names in one generation. It's just, then you'll spend the whole day, reciting names. If, everyone in that generation that is important is put in there, then there's no end to all the names. So every generation, one name is chosen. And so then in that way, you could say Atisha's name is kind of crowded out of the picture. But if you look at the more extensive discussions and evidence on influences on Gampopa, then definitely Atisha is there. Again, in the 12 volumes of Kyoba Rinpoche's teachings, for example, Atisha is mentioned very frequently. And often mentioned in the way that basically says, the Lord of Refuge, our great guru, Atisha said so and so. So Atisha is also a very important figure for Dakpo Kagyupas. So this refuge formula is universally used by all lineages of Tibetan Buddhism today, and it is said to have been composed by Atisha. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until Bodhi is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all wandering beings. The next recitation is the Four Immeasurable Minds. Then this particular recitation comes from Indian Buddhist sources. They are found in the Tantras, so they were not composed by the Indian masters, but it's said to have originated from like Buddha Vajradhara, Buddha Shakyamuni, when they were teaching various aspects of Vajrayana practice. These four immeasurable meditations, the four objects in which we should allow our mind. Our mind is naturally expansive and immeasurable. But right now in the state of confusion, the immeasurable nature of this mind has been directed at immeasurable confusions. And so our suffering is also immeasurable. So, even if the nature of the mind is immeasurable and unlimited, on this end and on this side of confusion, it is necessary and important for us to reroute, so to say, the wiring of where this immeasurable capacity is going to. So specifically for chapter 8, instead of going to feed the attachment and the grasping and the entanglements that we habitually get into to our bodies, to other people's bodies, to our stuff, to other people's stuff, to our identity, to other people's identities. All of that, we want to rewire this immeasurable nature so that it's wired towards these four states of mind: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. Now, there is a particular a particular stream of Buddhist teachings, or you could say philosophies, which looks at these four immeasurable minds as something cultivated progressively, so that what comes before is left behind or transcended when you get to the next and to the next and to the next. And in this way, they end up with equanimity. They say that you need to get to the stage of equanimity so that then, all the partiality that might exist on the level of joy, on the level of compassion, on the level of loving kindness, you leave behind all of that. You go to equanimity. Then from equanimity, even there, you have to go beyond equanimity. And that is what we call Buddha. There are some interpretations like that. And there are interpretations that say, in the state of Buddha, these things, like love, compassion, joy, and even equanimity, they are no longer existing for Buddhists. Because these are merely tools that are necessary when you are still on the path. Once you achieve the fruit, these tools are no longer relevant. So that there are traditions, interpretations of that sort. Again, Kyopa Jigten Sumgun rejects those explanations. he says that Buddhahood is the embodiment of the four immeasurable minds. He also says Buddhahood is the embodiment of bodhicitta. Aspiration bodhicitta and engagement bodhicitta, when perfectly embodied, that is what we call a Buddha. Again, there are some that will say, oh, no. Aspiration and engagement bodhicitta are only things that you need as long as you're not there. Once you get there, you don't need this anymore. Kyupa Rinpoche said, oh, no. You should not think like this. It's like Buddha is none other than the embodiment of bodhicitta. And the basis for cultivating bodhicitta are the four immeasurable minds. So these four immeasurables don't go away. So Kyupa Rinpoche makes the point that then why do some sutras, some treatises say things like, oh, there is no more four immeasurables. He said, that is simply meaning that Buddhas when Buddhas are Buddhas, they do not relate to things in a dualistic manner. So to the degree that our practice of the four immeasurable minds are dualistically based, which, on this side of confusion is necessarily so, then, of course, at the state of Buddha, there are no such dualistically based qualities. But he says, but it will be a mistake to think that Buddhas, their state of being is just an empty, a mere absence. So here, when we open our practices by reciting the four immeasurables, I think it's good to take to heart and say, these are not merely steps along the way, but to cultivate these four minds is to express the innate Buddha qualities. So that practice is not a means to an end. Practice is the very essence of being. To practice is to be Buddha. In that moment where our mind is practicing loving kindness, in that moment, the Buddha quality of loving kindness, an innate quality in all of us, that shines forth, poetically speaking. In the moment where we cultivate compassion, that moment is this Buddha quality that is made manifest. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from the bias of attachment and aversion. Dorje chanchen tele naro da ma
mi dabu badu jiden gongade loje chanjen dele naranda amar bamila joje gambo pomodu pagyawa de kongpa kadyalama namji so namla so wate ikebdengen do mezamningen do be donso nyala gyatso megyawa do ni changpa jiden gongpa shabda de tadu samgyo kyole me jinje loji tuje jinen ngom pesa ne gyan zendro de do do jinje lo 오민지기 얘기보다는 뜻은 사실 그게 뭐니 란신 조금 것도 이제 바자벨라 메샤라소 네.
So anyway, just some Zoom suggestions. If you are on Zoom, you can control what you see or don't see. So the advantage of Zoom is it's not the person who created the room that controls what you see. It's you. So on the corner of your screen, your Zoom screen, if you click that corner there, it will tell you what view you're able to get. You can change it to viewing the speaker. You can change it to gallery view, which means seeing everyone whose video is turned on. You can even turn off your own video, as in you don't see your own video, but other people can see you. That's also an option. So just FYI, you can adjust that accordingly to your need. So anyway, now back to the main topic, which is chapter 8 of Bodhicharyavatara. Chapter 8 of Bodhicharyavatara, as I discussed last week, is this chapter called Meditative Concentration. So then, what Bodhicharyavatara is, it is basically structured upon the underlying structure of the Bodhicharyavatara is the 6 paramitas of bodhisattva practices, which is the actual engagement bodhicitta. When we embark on the bodhisattva path in terms of doing the actual practices, they consist of the practice of the 6 paramitas. Now, although this structure is the underlying structure of the Bodhicharyavatara, only 4 of the 6 paramitas you will find explicitly given in the titles of the chapters. So what is missing is basically missing as in not explicitly, no chapters are explicitly dedicated with the title, is the first paramita, the paramita of giving, the paramita of the perfection of generosity, and the paramita of the perfection of disciplined conduct. But the other 4 paramitas, the paramita of patience, diligence, meditative concentration, and wisdom, they have specific chapters in Bodhicharyavatara, which is chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9. Right? So many commentaries will say that, will point out that although the paramita of giving or generosity doesn't have its own chapter with its own title like that, it nonetheless, of course, is present, and specifically is present in the context of, in the chapter called Taking Hold of Bodhicitta and Confession this chapter 2 and 3, because in chapter 2 and 3, Shantideva talks about basically gives the taking hold of bodhicitta. Shantideva basically gives the ritual of generating bodhicitta is basically chapter 3 as well as chapter 2. Chapter 2 is the preparation. Before you generate bodhicitta, you should purify yourself by making this clear. What are the causes of suffering and how we have to abandon the causes of suffering if we are to effectively cultivate the causes of happiness. And the ultimate happiness comes from bodhicitta. There are all sorts of happiness, right? All of those are temporary and partial. Then the final happiness is the happiness of the Buddha state. And the direct cause of the happiness of the Buddha state is bodhicitta. And so if we are to achieve the Buddha state, we need bodhicitta. If we are to effectively cultivate bodhicitta, first, he says, you need to let go of, or at least make the determination to want to let go of the causes of suffering. And so chapter 2 talks about that. Then in the context of then receiving the bodhisattva resolve, both in aspiration and engagement, you should make offerings. And there is the practice of giving or generosity. Then the paramita of disciplined conduct, sometimes translated as ethical conduct, that is chapter 4 and 5, which is carefulness and vigilant introspection. These are two qualities of mind that ensure that we can keep the disciplined conduct that the Buddha taught in detail. So it is said that because Shantideva was addressing this teaching, his first audience, his immediate audience, were his fellow monks at Nalanda University. And so they all already know, to be a monk in those days, you have to have memorized the rules of conduct, 252, 227, depending on tradition. But again, the gist of it, at least the over 200 rules of training, something that monks and nuns, they have memorized. So in that way, Shantideva need not talk about the specifics of that. But instead, he taught the necessary mental faculties, mental powers that will allow us to keep disciplined conduct. So that's 4 and 5. Then 6, 7, 8, 9 are the rest of the paramitas. Then the 8th is the paramita of meditative concentration. Now, in Bodhicharyavatara, the discussion on the meditative concentration is more focused. As in, it is not a chapter that attempts to address everything under this topic of meditative concentration. Which, for example, Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation, there, the meditative concentration is covering a broad range. Talking about the ways to still the mind, then depending on whether your particular package of afflictive emotions is more based on attachment or aversion or ignorance, then you should more focus your meditative concentration, establish your meditative concentration using this antidote or this antidote or this antidote. So if you want to know this broader meaning of meditative concentration, levels of concentration, types of antidotes to apply, and so on and so forth, and a more detailed and systematic discussion of this big topic, Jewel Ornament of Liberation is one of many places. Here in Bodhicharyavatara, meditative concentration, you could say one topic is selected, which is bodhicitta. Yeah, bodhicitta. And specifically, two aspects of cultivating bodhicitta is addressed in this particular chapter. One is called equalizing self and other. Second is called exchanging self with other. Yeah, so chapter 8 is primarily concerned about how to place your mind, your attention firmly and evenly on bodhicitta. However, in order to do that, there is a ngondro to that, so to say. Ngondro meaning there is a preparatory work that needs to be done. Just like when you want to plant a field, as a good farmer, you should prep the soil. If you don't take time to prep the soil, and you are kind of foolishly excited about your corn growing, your strawberries growing, and if you don't prep the ground well, you will be dealing with all sorts of issues, weeds and pests and not enough nutrition, and whatever you're going to plant is going to be sickly, it's going to be attacked by pests, there's going to be fungi growing and all sorts of issues. So preparatory work, ngondro, is important. So the ngondro for the cultivation of bodhicitta, according to Shantideva in chapter 8, is to establish a mind, our heart, that is free from entanglements. To be freed from entanglements. Entanglement, normally I think people say attachment. But I think the word attachment in English, that there are various uses of it, I think maybe now, we've heard attachment so much, attachment. Now, either we don't hear it anymore, we just say, oh yes, we need to be rid of attachment, or, we overextend what Buddha identified as a problem. We overextend that and we throw out everything because we're like, oh, that's attachment. My favorite one is like, no matter where you're teaching Dharma, it doesn't take long before somebody goes, what about attachment to my practice? Then I said, well, I've never had that problem, so I can't really answer your question. Usually, it's laziness with regards to practice, but we like abstract problems, Wow, but what about attachment to practice? What about attachment to, single-pointed mind? Oh, well, you'll be very fortunate if you have that problem. And if you have that problem, then your problem is beyond my pay grade. I'll send you to someone else. Our problem is, we get caught up in all sorts of other things. And that is what Shantideva wants us to work on. And so for the first 89 stanzas of chapter 8, Shantideva basically talks about the problem of entanglements. So entanglement, in a way, better than the word attachment, because entangled, the word itself already tells us, it's not good. It's not good, right? On the other hand, attachment, I think like in child developmental psychology, right? There is good attachment, a child towards his or her parents. Then, of course, later it might become entanglement. When the parents don't know how to let go and the child doesn't know how to, let go, then it becomes entanglement, right? So likewise, with everything, there could be healthy attachment, so to say. When does it become a problem to be let go, to be released, to be done with? It's when it becomes an entanglement. Now, for a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva, their entanglements, standing where we are standing at right now, if we are given a peek into what is entangling them, we might think, what? Really? That's entangling you? That's because we have no idea, how even the most subtle entanglements is still an entanglement. But right now, we don't need to worry about that. Because it's often just, your mind playing tricks. They don't want you to dismantle the obvious entanglements. So if you're overeducated in Buddhist books and ideas, then they will recruit that and turn that into Mara's armies. So that you go from teaching to teaching, debating the teacher about, entanglements of the fourth jhana, It's like, again, I don't know about you, I mean, if you truly have that problem, congratulations. It's the first thing I have to say. Then second thing, if you want me to help, I'm sorry, way beyond my pay grade, right? So, however, again, Shantideva's chapter 8, the first 89 verses, stanzas, is talking about the kind of entanglements that any reasonable person, when you look at that, you might not like it, and maybe you don't want to admit that these are really messy entanglements. You might not like it, but if you are a reasonable person, I would submit, it's quite obvious. These are entanglements. So, what are some of the examples? Infatuated with our own bodies. Then infatuated with the stuff that we have accumulated in service of this body. That toothpaste that will give you an extra sparkle, that will open doors for your dating life. Apparently, That's what, toothpaste commercials are doing. I mean, how else would they sell toothpaste? Oh, you're not going to go to the dentist. Yeah, but no, it doesn't sell as well as, perhaps if you use this toothpaste, all the people that you wanted to notice you will start noticing you. What they don't tell you, of course, is, all the people you don't want noticing you might also start noticing you. Then, infatuation with other people's bodies. Infatuation with name, fame, gain, your place in the world, all of that. So in the classical treatment of how to overcome these entanglements, which Shantideva gives suggestions. So there, right, last week we talked about how I said, basically that 89 verses or stanzas as ways in which Shantideva is teaching us how to say no to these entanglements. I want to clarify, and Anisutram's question takes us in that direction. What I want to clarify is that it's not a no in the sense of like, I don't want to look at you, no, right? It's not that kind of a no where you ignore, but rather, he tells you, have you considered, that particular entanglement that you have spent so much time on? What is it actually giving you? So actually, Shantideva is employing reason. But that's not the only tool that he employs. He also employs what you might call emotional arguments. Yeah, it's like, if I cannot reason with you, right, I'm going to shock you now. So it says, like these bodies that you desire so much, what's inside, he says? It's excrement. These are just walking bags of excrement. And then he says, like the stuff that you are so entangled over in terms of what's yummy and what's not yummy, He says, you're so entangled on the level of when it enters you. But once it passes beyond the throat, from that point on, all of it is disgusting. But you selectively choose not to remember. So that when it comes out, you don't spend time analyzing, oh, look at that. Oh, yes, that's from the Michelin restaurant. It's just flush. How we disproportionately look at one side and ignore the other side, until we can't ignore that anymore. That day will come for us. If we quote unquote die, if we die quote unquote a natural death. That's when it comes out and you have soiled yourself and you can't even clean. It becomes such a shock at that point because all our lives we have habituated the desirability when it's coming in and don't want to think of it once it passes the throat. It's a pattern that we spend our whole lives habituating, and we say, oh, this is reasonable. Shantideva says, is this reasonable? And when I tell you, Shantideva says, when I tell you, when I point out, right, the undesirability of all these entanglements that you spend all your life, your effort, your resources gaining, you say I am pessimistic. You say I'm a party pooper. But, he says, have you really thought about this? So again, he uses reasoning. He does. But he also uses, kind of like, in some ways you could say, kind of stark images, right? Almost you feel absurd. But if it is absurd, it's not absurd because it is not true. It is just absurd because you never considered it. Yeah, you never considered it. But if you were a gastrointestinal specialist, oh, then it's like, oh, not absurd, you know. Oh, yeah, they spend their time analyzing what comes out. Not absurd at all. Ooh, something new to look at. Ooh, what's this smell? What's this scent, you know? So it's really not that absurd, you know, what he is talking about. It's so absurd or not absurd is just where you are standing. And now we are absurd because we only stand on the side of how desirable these entanglements are and never considered the undesirable aspects. First 40 years of our lives is spent on how to get entangled. Second 40 years of our lives is not, you know, how to get unentangled, but to complain about entanglements. First part of our lives, how to get stuff. Second part of our lives, how to get rid of stuff. That's the biography, the autobiography of all of us. Shantideva is telling us that, you know. But not only that, they're actually, what he's more concerned about is not stuff. It's not bodies. It's how getting or not getting stuff, bodies, position, fame, all of that disturbs the mind, agitates the mind. So frustration frustrates the mind. When the mind is frustrated, then everything goes wrong. And when the mind becomes frustrated, then on a deeper level, according to Shantideva, what becomes even stronger when the mind is frustrated is ego grasping. Some people, this is not a criticism, this is just, you know, describing it as it is, you know. For some people, because of their karma, circumstances, choices, you know, karma is about choices, okay? It's not fate. Because of their karma, because of choices that we have made, you know, explicitly or not so explicitly, we don't have much, you know. Some of us, again, because of good karma in this case, we know how to find freedom within not much. You know, I said, you know, until now, I go to the store I don't go to the store with a list saying, you know, I am going to buy the following, like the food store. I mean, the truth is sometimes I do that, but the natural thing to do is, you know, I go into the store and I see what's on sale. That's what I will be eating for the next few days. I mean, trust me, I have a lot of other entanglements, but in this case, you know, it's just like habit, you know. With a friend, with May, we live in the same town, and sometimes we joke, you know, we're like, you know, yeah, we might live in America for so long, you know, fundamentally, we were born in a third world country. Our shopping habits are still very third world. You just walk around the store looking for what's on sale, you know, and then May says, you know, her husband is so frustrated with, you know, like, gosh, you know, why can't you just buy this and then let's get done with, you know? But it's just that kind of habit, of course, you know. But some people, when they don't have much, when we don't have much, then everything matters so much. And it's very hard to let go. Now you see, when the Buddha gave this training to his monks and nuns, and he said, when you join the monastic order, 8 things called the 8 requisites, you should train so that only these 8 requisites you should think of as yours. You see, the Buddha was very skillful. The Buddha did not say, you know, don't think of anything as yours from the get-go. Of course, eventually, you train yourself so that even the 8 requisites, you're no longer. But he says, you limit now. Right? You used to have 3 palaces and 99 Rolls Royces, you know. Now, you want to join this order? 8 things. The robes that you wear that are in 3 components, the lower robe, the upper robe, and the outer robe. That's 3. The bowl that you need to eat and drink out of, 4. Water strainer, because in India, at Buddha's time, you know, water don't come out of a tap. You need a strainer so that the little creatures, bugs, you know, you don't accidentally kill them. So you need a strainer. You should have a sitting cloth. You should have thread and needle to repair your robe when it's torn. Not, you know, go to Tibetan Spirit and buy another one. You sew back, you know. That wasn't an intentional placement of product, as they call it, you know. Just making fun of myself. But that's not an intentional product placement, you know, slip it in, Tibetan Spirit. But it's very funny, I tell you, don't tell other people, but we see a lot of things, Tibetan Spirit, you know. We do our best, of course, you know, when we're selling things to people. But we have people, you know, that will write back and say, you know, this robe or this thing that I got, you know, there is this one pencil or pen line, you know, on it, you know, I want a new one. It's like, okay, as a customer, that's certainly reasonable. But then my judgmental mind, it's like, wait, you know, this is not fashion. This is like your new life now. You're a monk or nun, you know. I said, okay, go back to just being, you know, a business owner, treating customers. Don't think about their dharma. That's not my business. That's their teacher's business, But anyway, those 8 requisites, very skillful. Why Buddha gave, only 8? I remember reading listening or reading one teaching that Ajahn Sumedho, a very senior forest tradition monk, American, but lived in England. Then now back in England. For a while he lived in Thailand. Way back he talked about his own experience on how skillful the Buddha's prescriptions. So he said, you think, that these 8 requisites, that when someone becomes a monk or nun, you think that, oh, look, they are so serene, they are so peaceful, calm, they only have these 8 requisites. And he said, what you don't see and what you don't understand is, like, for the first 10 years of your training, it's a constant, constant state of being triggered. Because you only have 8 things that you can call your own. So he said, you have no idea how much neurosis can come out of one bowl. And it says, even when people walk close to the bowl, 5 feet away, you can feel your body reacting. Because what if they damage the bowl? Then I'll be bowlless, What if I lose my needle and thread, Then I can't patch my robe. What if the robe gets soiled? Then I have to wash it and I can't go anywhere because I can't walk around naked. It's like, so he said, what that does, limiting it to 8 things is, you see so clearly how much energy we invest and transfer onto all the stuff that is around us. He said, you as a layperson think you don't have a lot of entanglements. He says, but that's because, you can afford to lose so many things and you still have so many things. But when you take up the training of a monk or nun, it's not like when you take up the training, your entanglements disappear. He says, what happens is the Buddha puts a microscope onto the situation for you to see clearly how much we get entangled. When we see how much we get entangled, we drop the entanglements. If we cannot drop the entanglements, that means we have not seen enough of it. So not to be cruel. Sometimes I really want to say to people when they come and say, I don't go around telling people things, but when they come, because they think, oh, you're a Dharma teacher, maybe you'll solve this problem. And then they say this and that, and what I really want to say to them, which of course most of the time I cannot say, is basically, please suffer more. I do try to say that to myself, please suffer more. Because, we're just not so convinced. We are only temporarily convinced when we are frustrated. Then we temporarily turn to Dharma. But the answer that the Dharma has to give us, we're not that interested, Then especially Tibetan Buddhism, there's also a lot of skillful means, but also distractions. Oh, wealth, here. Oh, long life, here. Oh, attraction, here. Oh, blah, 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 here. Oh, blah, 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 here, you know. Oh, protection, here, you know. Even a great teacher, you know, teaching a topic like Shantideva, I think maybe you get 100 people interested. Talk about some deity with, you know, 4.5 hands. 1,000 people will wake up an hour before and sit there and wait. But who really wants to listen about, you know, a skin bag with 9 holes and stuff oozing out, which is chapter 8 of Shantideva, first half. What is this body? A skin bag with 9 holes. What is life? Waste management. Because stuff is oozing out of these 9 holes. So life, for a lot of people, consists of waste management. So Shantideva says, look, you know. Now, summary of that whole half. Verse 89, reflecting in such ways as these upon the excellence of solitude. So he leads us to, he wants us to get to the point of appreciating solitude. Not to be lonely, but to be alone. But to be alone. Alone here is not encouraging being a loner. You know, he's a loner. It's like, oh, he's a loner, he's a loner, he's a loner. And then eventually, you know, is he the Unabomber? Not get that kind of loner. But this image of being alone, of solitude, is actually an image of freedom. So elsewhere, in the 3 principal aspects of the path, Je Rinpoche Tsongkhapa says, you know, the determination to be free is the definition of renunciation. So develop this determination to be free. To be free from entanglements, it's freedom. And freedom is light, is pleasant, is satisfying. The stanzas right before this, you know, Shantideva talks about the advantages of living in the wilderness. Very unusual, you know. These days, you know, we go hiking. Yeah, in Shantideva's time, you know, people don't go hiking. Okay. Like there's enough walking around already, just like, you know, getting lunch. Yeah, people don't go, oh, it's the weekend. You want to go to the mountains and hike? It's like, yeah, you want to be eaten by a tiger? That would be Shantideva's audience's response, you know, if you say, oh, let's go hiking. Everyone will just look at him and say, you're out of your mind. But actually here he's saying, you know, it's good to go. Go out there. Can you imagine Shantideva alive today? And then he hears people saying, this weekend, let's go camping. And then finally he's like, okay, good. We're going out of the madness of like life. And then of course, when you pick him up, he's like, wait, you have your whole house in your Subaru for this camping trip. Shantideva's wilderness is not like that, But he says, go out into the wilderness. No one will bother you. No one will bug you. Specifically, 3 things he says. Pacify completely all discursiveness. So 3 things. One is, excellence of solitude is externally to dispel distractions. Internally pacify wandering thoughts. Yeah? Don't be like that yogi who, gave away everything, went up to the mountains, 4 years later came down and said everything did not work. Why? Because I gave away all the stuff, but my attachment to the stuff followed me for the next 4 years. So give up external distractions. Don't tell people what your forwarding address is. Go into witness protection program. He says, do that. Then internally pacify discursiveness, meaning mental distractions. And then internally overcome self-grasping by cultivating the mind of bodhicitta. That's verse 89. The 3 antidotes to the 3 outer, inner, and secret entanglements. First entanglement is entanglement to stuff, entanglements to bodies, entanglements to fame and gain, all those things. It says the antidote to that is to physically remove yourself. So on the practical level, you have to see, your circumstances. You can always simplify. It's not an either or. You don't have to go from here to 8 requisites. If you can, great. But don't let that become an obstacle and say, oh no, I can't. You can always simplify. But don't spend $75 to buy a simplified, trash can now that you're following Marie Kondo, which apparently she was selling stuff as well, for you to get rid of stuff. It doesn't have to be that complicated. That's the first. So I have some friends here, in North Carolina, Asheville, kind of hippy-dippy friends, but they have great methods too. So I know one young friend, he was a former student when I was teaching in a college, And the way he lived his life, as he says, I do not buy a new shirt or anything unless I have given 2 away. So each time, he says, sure, I still buy, but each time when I want to buy, click or go to the store, first I need to find 2 things that two clothing, 2 pieces of clothing that I can give away. If I cannot find those 2 that I can give away, then he said, I don't buy. There are simple things like that we can do, Second entanglement is mental emotional entanglements. So then that's the inner level. Be done with that. Be rid of that. Third entanglement, the final entanglement, is the entanglement to self-grasping. And that we have to train in bodhicitta. And from there, starting stanza 90, verse 90, Shantideva begins the second half of this chapter. From 90 to verse 187, the last verse of this chapter, is about now firmly establish your meditative concentration, your stability in bodhicitta. The more common ways of cultivating preliminary meditative concentration is like what we call shamatha, right? The breath, a pebble, just one thing. But here, this form of shamatha found in this chapter is not the single pointed mind absorbed in one object, not a state of absorption, but rather you could say it's a dynamic way to arrive at the same place of calm abiding. In other words, here Shantideva is in a way, giving a unique way to think about calm abiding and how to achieve this calm abiding. Yeah, he's saying, like the first two parts, the lack of calm abiding that is due to being entangled by external stuff and dragged around by internal mental emotional states, that's pretty much standard in all discussions of meditative concentration. Including, mindfulness for businessmen. That you can sign up for $1,000. The facilitator has trained 5 years in mindfulness, but he taught at Harvard, so of course you'll pay $1,000. So that kind of treating the mind. By the way, he was an adjunct at Harvard, but then the biography doesn't need to tell you all those things, Continuing Education Division of Harvard is the fine print. Anyway. The outer entanglements and the inner entanglements, that's commonly discussed in most forms of meditative training. The unique one in this chapter on meditative concentration is saying the ultimate culprit in disturbing your mind, in not allowing your mind to settle evenly, is self-grasping. And this is the unique form of shamatha in chapter 8. So this actually, in a way you can say, this shamatha is very practical. It is to be discovered in the midst of day-to-day life, in the midst of our daily interaction with others. And so in this chapter, barely, he just alludes to it. He doesn't, at most he alludes to what we might call a sitting practice. But mostly, Shantideva here is not talking about sitting this way or that way, sitting quietly. He's talking about changing your attitude, changing minds.
So in this changing of mind, meaning changing from a self-cherishing mind to a other-cherishing mind, giving up self-grasping via self-grasping. This is also unique in this chapter. Giving up self-grasping by way of self-grasping, which is the second of the two. Equalizing self and other, that's kind of straightforward. Exchanging self for other, it's here unique. He says you use pride, you use jealousy, and you use competitiveness. He says you use those three and use them to destroy themselves. Yeah, so he's a very skillful, right? Reverse psychologist. Because he knows, we love these things. We love pride. We love competitiveness. We love jealousy. You say, okay, let's work with that. So equalizing self and other, from stanza 90 to 103, basically. There he talks about how the arguments and or rather he persuades us to work on equalizing self and other. Right now, one over here, yeah, and then beyond here is infinity minus one, right? One, infinity minus one. And right now, the math that we all do is 1 greater than, right? The sign, right? 1 greater than infinity minus 1. And that's supposed to make perfect sense. 1 greater than infinity minus 1. If anyone even suggests that 1 equals infinity minus 2, we are outraged. We are outraged. How unreasonable. That's crazy. That's crazy talk. I'm very much like that. I know, so I'm not insinuating only apply to you, no. Very much so, I think the moment you wake up, and even maybe when you're asleep, it's so deeply there. 1 equals, or 1 not equals, 1 greater than infinity minus 1. That's how we are now. Shantideva says, let's work on 1 equals infinity. So that this infinity can include that 1. How about remove 1, remove equals, just infinity? If we want to talk about nature of mind, pristine nature of mind, Rigpa, all of that, right? Those are all very profound topics. Very, inspiring. That's good to be inspired. But don't kid ourselves, right? There is a nuts and bolts level of what it means to live in this vision of infinity that currently, our underdeveloped mind don't really like, actually. We are so committed to that equation, 1 greater than infinity minus 1. So in this first part, Shantideva is wanting us to dismantle all the other things and leave just infinity. So can we maintain this state of meditative equipoise, which is what meditative concentration can also be said to be, or this calm abiding mind, whereby self and other are equal. So he gives, reasonings, as I said, but he also gives emotional, like prompts. So he gives reasoned prompts and emotional prompts to get us to kind of make that shift. Just like in the first half, he gives reasoned prompts and emotionally charged prompts. I like to kind of, have you help, encourage you to think of these teachings as prompts. They prompt you to a particular course of action. They're not commandments. They're not rules. Yeah, they're not the same as, those like very well thought out, for the most part, IKEA instructions on how to, construct your house. I don't know if IKEA is selling houses yet, but they should, Yeah. Just with a Phillips wrench, you can construct your whole house. For that, you have to follow, I too many times thought they were just prompts, Then that table is kind of wonky, But Buddha's teachings is not like that. Buddha's teachings, they are prompts. You pay attention to the prompts. Take them to heart. Yeah. And then let them work, And as to how they work, it's not like putting together an IKEA table or house. Yeah, so here he uses reasoned arguments and emotional arguments. So, example, he says, like, think of all beings as having one body. And just as how, when your foot is about to be harmed, and not your hand, if you see that soon enough, you move your whole body out. You don't say, oh, that is the leg's problem. The foot about to be harmed, that's the leg's problem. It's not the hand's problem. No, you get the whole body out of. And it says likewise, you should not only think, oh, that's, it won't harm me. I don't care, It harms others, well, that's fine. Yeah. Now here I want to point out, I think, that he says, in a way, right, this seems to work counter to, and I think some people, I've seen some people from a different Buddhist tradition indirectly kind of criticizing this approach and say, Buddha taught us to relinquish attachment. Here it seems like what you have done is you have enlarged your attachment from the personal to the impersonal. Yes, superficially it does look like this. So therefore I would suggest we also need to be very careful. Don't end up like holding the wrong end of this tool. This is a sharp knife. Know which end to hold. If you grasp, the blade side, you will bleed. You need to grasp the handle side. So yes, it's there is like treachery along this path, because it is using self-grasping, but now it says, instead of grasping to the limited self, grasp all sentient beings as being yourself, right? But it says, this should be developed so that it becomes a source of joy. So cannot be done forcing or blindly. Yeah, it says, which verse is that? Let's see. I don't have that verse, but basically he says, oh, here, yes, 107. Those whose minds are practiced in this way, whose joy it is to soothe another's ills, will venture into the hell of unrelenting pain, meaning Avicii hell, the deepest, as swans sweep down upon a lotus lake. Key here is those whose minds are practiced, cultivated. And an uncultivated mind cannot do this. And a unrefined, uncultivated mind cannot go, grasp everyone's suffering onto themselves. Then you are grasping the wrong end of this knife. It needs to be cultivated. Needs to be refined. And for us, the first step of this refinement is entanglements. But these entanglements we don't ultimately reject. We temporarily have to set aside in order to build up the capacity to become like swans sweeping down upon a lotus lake. Where suffering is, we go there. I was just thinking, I was talking to a friend, I said, just 2 days ago, I said, a monk friend, we were talking about the situation in Nepal and India. And I was saying to the friend, I said, I recently, it just, I said, I should have thought of this long time ago, but I just recently thought, wow, many of these people must be bodhisattvas. Who am I talking about? Maybe this is controversial, but so if it's controversial, if you're listening, if I offend, that's not my intention. But I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there must be many of these bodhisattvas. Who am I thinking of? All the people who sign up for the studies that developed the vaccines we have right now. They did not fear, oh, what if I get this, I get that, 20 years down the road, 40 years down the road. What if I develop this symptom, I develop that? They saw, what was happening, and they volunteered to enter these studies Now, maybe you debate, oh, it's good, it's not good, pharmacy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, I'm not debating that. I'm saying they didn't think of themselves. Or if they thought of themselves, they did not let that stop them from saying, let me do it. That is practically, there's one bodhisattva especially in East Asian tradition, is emphasized, Kshitigarbha bodhisattva. Right? And his famous vow is, he says, if I do not venture into the hell realms, who will go? If I, who have bodhicitta, who is training in bodhicitta, if I am unwilling to go to the hell realms, can I expect anybody else? And if nobody goes there, who is going to help those that are there? And so many of us so inspired, when we hear that. But then when it comes to action, it's very hard. So I said to my friend, I said, when I do practice dedicating prayer, all mother sentient beings, particularly I should think about, all the people who volunteered for the studies, right, that gave rise to the vaccine. Like, they are really kind. They didn't think of themselves. So here, this ability will venture into hell of unrelenting pain as swans sweep down upon a lotus lake. It's just amazing. But key is those whose minds are cultivated, refined. So we have to work on that. Then the ocean-like immensity of joy arising when all beings will be freed. Will this not be enough? Will this not satisfy the wish for my own freedom? What is that to me? The work of bringing benefit to beings will not then make me proud and self-admiring. The happiness of others is itself my satisfaction. I do not expect another recompense. I do not expect praise. I do not expect people saying good job. But just to see others becoming free, bringing benefits to all. Starting from 111 is the section on exchanging self and other. Yeah. Then basically that the way to cultivate, in other words, practice, meditate. The way to cultivate, to practice, to meditate on exchanging self and other. Of course, many of us are familiar with the technique-oriented meditation called Tonglen, right? The basis of Tonglen is the same as this, but here Shantideva doesn't talk about Tonglen the way we know it. Right? Here he is basically, I would say, he's encouraging us to engage in what we would call thought exercises. Right? We have this, we say thought exercises, as in, okay, put yourself in this scenario, and in this scenario, just see how this scenario would play out if, and the approach here is, if roles were reversed. Here, it's basically the practicing of exchanging self with other is put yourself in the other person's shoes. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. Then specifically, he says, in terms of others, there are others that we, not even with necessarily like, just an ordinary person. When we look at what we call others, meaning not self, Generally, they fall into three groups. Those who are socially, intelligence-wise, whatever, whom we consider, whether correctly or incorrectly, to be inferior to us. And those whom we think are our peers. And those whom we think are better than us. So Shantideva divides them into these three groups for the purposes of these thought exercises. Then he says, with regards to those who we, label as lesser than us, in whatever areas you might be thinking of, then he says, basically that is pride. Right? And in those whom we think is equal to us, we regard them with competitiveness. Like, I need to keep up with them. I need to be better than them. Then, with regards to those whom we perceive to be better than us, jealousy, envy. So in this bodhicitta training, he says, so you exchange yourself with the other. So, example, if you see that, oh, they are inferior to me, they're not as good as me, he says, now try to see, try to look at the situation from that person's point of view. Then can you see how your actions, which of course now you think, oh, it's not my problem, they're just jealous. They are inferior to me and they are jealous of how good I am. I'm trying so well to be good, I'm trying so well to be good. I'm not harming anyone. Why? They're just jealous of me. And he says, now you switch perspective. You put yourself in their shoes. And then you can look at Han Lai and say, Shantideva says, when you do that, then you see more clearly what the problem is. In other words, you develop empathy. On the one hand, you develop empathy for the other, whether the other is relating to you with pride or competitiveness or jealousy, the three groups. You develop empathy for their point of view. That's one thing. Secondly, you develop clarity about what you can do better, how you can refine yourself. So this exercise of exchanging self and other fulfills two purposes. Two purposes. One, again, you develop empathy for others. The others who look at you, or you think look at you with jealousy, or look at you with pride, or look at you with competitiveness, develop empathy for them. Because when you develop empathy for them, what happens is you're not so harsh and judgmental. And then when we're not so harsh and judgmental towards others, we can also not be so harsh and judgmental to ourselves. Then there is working space, There is a possibility of something meaningful transpiring between us and others. So develop empathy for others. It's one goal that is achieved through this. The other goal that is achieved is standing on the other side, we can see more clearly what we need to work on further. And we all have things that we can work on further. So that is the way in which he basically so from starting on 134, all the harm with which this world is rife, of fear and suffering that there is, clinging to the I has caused it. What am I to do with this great demon? Well, if this I is not relinquished wholly, sorrow likewise cannot be avoided. If they do not keep away from fire, people can escape from being burned. To free myself from harm and others from their suffering, let me give myself to others, loving them as I now love myself. For I am now beneath the rule of others. Of this you must be certain, O my mind. And now no longer shall you have the thought that does not wish to benefit the benefit of beings. My sight and other senses now the property of others. To use them for myself would be improper, and it is likewise disallowed to use my faculties against their owners, against others. Thus sentient beings will be my chief concern, and everything I see my body has will all be seized and offered for the use and service of all other beings. So that's the actual practice of exchanging self and other. Then from 140 on, is where he divides things, people into what we habitually think to be lower than us, to be equal than us, and doing better than us. Then the specific afflictive emotions of, looking at those lower than us with pride, looking at those equal to us with competitiveness, looking at those who are better than us with jealousy. Then, in terms of looking lower in a position of pride, basically you switch around so that, you get to understand the other person's jealousy towards you, and then you get to see the absurdity of your pride towards them. So this is like using pride to overcome jealousy, and using jealousy to overcome pride. So it's a way to undermine this duality, to see the interdependent nature of this. So that's part of what's going on, starting from 141 to 167 are the three thought exercises. To 154, 141 to 154. Then 155 onwards, it's kind of using the gentle way, it says, to encourage us to commit ourselves to this practice. 155 to 167. Then 168 to 170 to 184. Is using the stern way. So you see Shantideva, using all different devices, using reasoning, using appealing to our reason, appealing to our emotions. Gently talking to us and firmly scolding us. And he teaches us to use those things too, in order to train our mind. So training the mind, the path, is not a one tool, job. It's always about having, a robust tool bag, so that we know which tool to use when. And so, in other words, flexibility of mind is really important. You cannot have a rigid mind. flexibility of mind, creativity of mind, but the flexibility and the creativity needs to be grounded in sincerity. Otherwise, we're just playing games, right? Sincerity and authenticity as to what are we hoping to get out of this. I would imagine, an artist can kind of appreciate this, that there is a discipline to the art, to the craft, but that discipline is a reference point, because to create beauty requires flexibility, requires ambiguity, requires not fearing experimenting, not reckless experimenting, but experimenting as a way to self-discover, to actualize. And for that, no one can do it for you. No one can do it for me, except for yourself, except for myself. Ooh. We have 15 minutes for me to breathe and for you to think about something to say. No.
I said all mine on chat. I knew that the nine holes were gonna come up and the waste management.
Ah, yes, good.
Yeah, I knew that was gonna come on there. And also on Zoom, you can do full screen too.
Yes, of course, yes. I want to share with you one adaptation of Shantideva as an example of flexibility and working with, It's based on his emotional appeal to the yuckiness of body, And again, some people take it too much and think, oh, you should, and worry that, oh, this will develop, self-hate and hate of the body. It's never this heavy, So anyway, when I was a teaching assistant as a graduate student at the University of Virginia, one semester I taught as a teaching assistant for this class, which is an Introduction to Buddhism class by one of the professors. And this class is very popular. Lots of people sign up usually when it's offered. A few hundred people. This time, I think that time when I taught it, I was a teaching assistant for, there were like maybe 240 students in this class. So then the professor that day was basically talking about the traditionally called the repulsive nature of body. Or I like to call it the yuckiness of the body. So of course, the professor, then I thought, I wonder how, she's going to handle this, with these 18-year-olds, bags of hormones together with, bags of filth, all mixed together, running around with no parental supervision. So it's like, wonder how, she's going to, talk about this. So she basically led them through a mini thought experiment, or we Buddhists call meditation. Thought experiment, And so she's talked about, okay, now, imagine, this weekend, you go to this party, very noisy, Then, somebody caught your eye, and then you finally, made your way over, to go meet this person. Then you talk to this person. Then it seemed like this person is also interested in you. So she just went on and on, doing, she's like, imagine this, imagine this, imagine that. And I'm like, okay, let's see where the turn is going to occur, like, and she was getting pretty good, like it's getting to like, going from like PG-13 to about, the rating system of this narrative, of this thought experiment, we thought is going to start turning to, NC-17. And then at that point, right before that, she goes, and then suddenly this person sticks their finger up. And then you're like, wait, up what? Up their nose, and pulls out the biggest booger you have ever seen, and does this. And just, it's very effective, Everyone is like, oh! She's like, see? The things that we tune out because we over-exaggerate certain things and ignore certain other things. And she said, in that instant, whatever fantasy, whatever lust, whatever that you're thinking that you're going to do with this person, it just all gets pacified, like, okay, I'm going to go back over there now. It's not just discuss at this point, it's also like, oh my gosh, this person is insane.
Or this person gets sick, or they have diarrhea, or they
Yeah. Well, you don't need, the point is, you don't even need to go to that point, just. Yeah, so anyway, questions or comments? No? Oh,
Dr. Lai,
uh-huh.
as a mother of teenagers,
Yes.
I'm thinking of how difficult it is to us to point this out to our children.
Yeah.
And make them understand that.
Yeah, you kind of like, discreetly like leave, Shantideva open to a particular page,
Yeah, well,
and
we
wish,
have to
and wish like, oh, may they have the good karma of, paying attention to something here.
Yeah, we have to compete with Instagram.
Oh, yes.
That is a terrible. It's
oh, you are already behind time. I can tell you. It's now TikTok, okay,
well, TikTok, yes.
and Snapchat, okay. Instagram is already like mom's thing.
Yeah.
Facebook is like grandparents' thing. And Instagram is parents' thing, and Snapchat and Kik and TikTok. That's sort of their thing.
I know. Yeah, but it's very difficult to us.
Yeah, I think practically, I mean, I don't have kids or anything, but I think for parents, mostly now is to keep them safe, not by forcing them to be safe, but letting them know, where these lines are, and then letting them know no matter what, they can come to you. Then they have to figure out those lines themselves. You offer them, some prompts as to where those lines are between safety and danger.
Yeah, sometimes in the car, when I'm driving the car with my teenager, I talk to him and I tell him, oh, you know, today at class, Mr. Lai said that blah, 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 and just like that. No more compensation.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what I can do. Now.
Yeah.
And of course, the behavior we use at home. I mean, if they see me to go every weekend with a boyfriend, a different boyfriend, and
it's modeling, sure.
Yeah.
Right. So if we, we, them, anyone, like we show that, there is something to be said about contentment, not like joyless contentment, but real kind of like appreciation of contentment that other people can see us enjoying, It changes. It can change people, If we ourselves learn, to just like appreciate and enjoy, like, like just a bowl of yogurt, or something like that. Not a show, but really just kind of like whatever we have in front of us, we learn how to really appreciate. I think then people around us, and those of you who are parents or grandparents, it will impress upon them that, it doesn't need to be so fancy, so complicated. Then they don't, hopefully, you hope, they won't chase after so many entanglements.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
My recent experiences in the hospital, there were actually a lot of really great things that happened in the last month for me. Some of them bear directly on today's lecture, because I came really face to face with the issues of how repulsive and how ultimately unreliable the physical body is. And the part about waste management and so on and so forth was really brought very sharply into focus for me in the last 5 weeks. So this is sort of a roundabout way of saying that I sort of experienced the truth of this and a lot of the things that are in the lecture with my own experience in the last 5 or 6 weeks. It was really brought starkly into focus.
Right.
I also have a comment, if I may, from last week's lecture. You talked about the futility of pursuing the objects of our desire, and you also talked about the gap that when we go about trying to satisfy all these desires, we have these desires. There's a gap between reality and what our desires are. And on that particular point, I also think that the nature of our desires is not only a gap between what we want in the moment and what we actually have, but the other problem is that our own desires are constantly changing.
Yes.
It's like you get one thing and then there's something else, or another degree of it, or something different, that your desires are shifting and so changeable.
Yes.
That there's not only the gap between satisfying them in the moment, but there's also the problem that tomorrow the desire is going to be different. So
that's why retailers are, never going to be out of business. So unreliable. Yeah, exactly. Even the objects that we desire is so unreliable, constantly shifting and changing. Just when you think you have the latest of whatever, it changes. Yeah.
So with what Lawrence said, it seems like if we can generalize to looking at when I want gain, I that's a problem right there. But just kind of just being aware day by day that I'm not getting what I want, and the frustration of that, just generalizing and trying to cut those into entanglements. Just being aware of them and being aware of the suffering of it. And then that's kind of the process of
that's the process. That's the meditation, which is to look at all directions, you know. So this is not the kind of meditation where you sit quietly. Although, yes, you could do it also there. But there's no evidence of this in this chapter explicitly. So I think it's also good to recognize that Shantideva is saying you can develop meditative concentration off cushion. I think this is what's powerful about this chapter too. That this is off cushion, but very direct, you know. Know when to say, and to continue to be in physical proximity to this situation is no longer good for me or for anybody else. Time to bolt. Of course, we cannot live lives by constantly bolting. That's also not the point. He's not saying that. He's just saying, know when it's getting sticky. And extricate yourself before you create suffering for yourself, more suffering for yourself and for others. Then likewise, mental, emotional entanglements. It's constantly happening, right? But start developing an awareness of, okay, this is what's going on, you know? And even if like you can't stop the train wreck, don't look away. Because when we look away and then we have the train wreck, then it's a useless train wreck because we're never going to learn anything from it. And that's how samsara is so powerful, because samsara is very good at telling us how to look away. So early on when I say, you know, please suffer more, I don't mean just mindlessly suffering, but suffering without looking away. Then we begin to see, oh, over here I can draw this line better. Right? Then when we draw the line well, right, we're really satisfied. And don't be shy to enjoy that satisfaction. I think sometimes overemphasize that, oh, you should not get attached. No, depending on where you are on the path, that kind of attachment is good because it's an attachment to experiencing the fruits of many letting goes that we know how to do. Then we gain confidence, you know, like, letting go is a good thing. Then we develop, right? Then the I, you know, which is problematic. It's good to know it's problematic, but it should not turn into a like constantly, you know, you slap a label on it, problematic, 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 right?
Drama.
Yeah, then yeah, you are again, exactly, right? We're feeding that that particular grasping. But then it's just, it is what it is. On the most basic level, it is what it is. As in that I is unstable, unreliable, constantly changing. And so see that, and once we see that, it's not problematic. It can function and exist illusorily. Then there's less entanglement, less heaviness, less suffering.
Does like Dorje Sampa, the Vajrayana path, you can kind of use the beginning of these and then at the end kind of finish it off, or Vajrayana.
Especially Kyoba Rinpoche's way of teaching these topics. He doesn't draw hard and fast lines. Oh, this is this yana, this is this yana, this is this yana. He says everything the Buddha gave, the Buddha gave for us to overcome the 10 non-virtues, generally speaking, and the 84,000 kleshas. Use whatever. Yeah. Part of that tool bag, Because, there are no lines, in nature. There are no lines, no dividing lines in nature, That the great masters have kind of articulated the teachings and arranged the teachings here. That's like providing a grid for those of us who like grids, But ultimately, the path doesn't have these grids. So I'm a partisan, That's what I love so much about like Kyoba Rinpoche's way of handling all these things. So he doesn't encourage, philosophical debates and like, but this category is this and that category is that. But yeah, exactly. Like you're saying, you can use this, and then to what degree you use it, well, you experiment, because it's from there that understanding can arise. And understanding is what's going to feed us and encourage us to gain more understanding, Yeah, so Buddha said, his invitation to people, the historical Buddha, is not come and join me, come to believe me, it's come and investigate. So this curiosity is good, is to be encouraged. Not philosophical curiosity. But existential curiosity, from the heart. Yeah, so anyway, it's past time now, especially those of you in Asia. Don't stay up too late, especially this season, pandemic season. The virus is very powerful, but there's also the thing about us having a stronger basic constitution. That helps too. And to have a stronger basic constitution is not all just physical, it's also mental and emotional. So if we can apply the Dharma, be more lighthearted. Lighthearted should not lead to reckless behavior. Outer, inner, secret has to all correspond. Yeah. So secret level, work on seeing the faults of self-grasping, then naturally we give up self-grasping. If we don't see the faults and then we try to impose and judge ourselves and say, bad, 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 you are grasping onto self, all that is counterproductive. Yeah. Developing, seeing how self-grasping is ultimately self-defeating, and how cherishing others is ultimately self-fulfillment. Basically, this is what Shantideva's approach is. So seeing that, and then from there, mental, emotionally, we can be more at ease. So again, specific to the escalating of the situation in Asia now, a healthy dosage of fear prevents us from doing stupid things. But also, fear should not be ruling our lives. So how to balance those two, right? So healthy fear to prevent us from doing stupid things, but not the fear that will compromise our immune system. Constantly, stirred up because your body cannot maintain this constant state of being stirred up. Then it becomes chronic inflammation. Constantly on fight or flight mode, you will not last. So all different layers of attending to the work of the heart and protecting yourself and protecting others. That is important. So anyway, thank you for participating in this. This is the two-part series that Linda asked if I would do, and to kind of complement what Khenchen Rinpoche has done. Khenchen Rinpoche's teachings on chapter 8 and other chapters of Shantideva is available on his YouTube channel. If somebody can provide that link for people who don't already know where it is on the chat, that will be most wonderful. Then I caught that I think Linda very kindly, yes, teachers have to pay bills, teachers have to eat. Linda very kindly gave a link to say if people want to make offerings. Right now, I can tell you this teacher is not hungry, this teacher is not cold, this teacher is not thirsty. Right now, if you are inspired to make an offering, please direct it to India or Nepal. Seva International is one organization that I have given to recently. SEWA. Javier, if you can look quickly, if you can pull up that link, Seva International. They are providing medical support equipment to India. Seva International is a good one to do. Please, if you're inspired to offer, then offer that over there. As an ongoing project, there is the More Curry, Less Worry in Nepal, which temporarily, because of the lockdown, we cannot do the weekly distribution of lunch. But in a more long-term way, we will continue to do that. We now have enough money to give 50 lunches each week for a year. So I kind of cheekily like to say, yes, there is free lunch. This world is not always so harsh. There is free lunch, and just modestly 50 lunches a week is what we are doing now for the next year. This need will go up. The situation in India and Nepal and other places in Asia, there's definitely, we wish the governments could have done better. Yeah, of course. We wish that people would have been more careful. But one side of that reality also, so that we don't become too judgmental, is that, and in many parts of the world with the coronavirus, it's like people are saying, it's not like we want to choose, but unfortunately, for many people, they do have to choose, between being hungry today and potentially not able to breathe next week. Unfortunately, so many places, that is the choice that they are being asked to choose. It's just unimaginable to have to choose between these two, Do my kids go to bed crying hungry tonight? Or should I expose them to the possibility that I might not breathe next week? And who's going to take care of them? They have to choose that, It's terrible. But that's also, the reality of so many people. So anyway, do what you can. And sometimes don't have to go all the way to India or Nepal, look around your community. Yeah, so anyway, thank you so much. And we will end with a simple dedication.
Dr. Lai?
Yes.
I just want to thank you so much on behalf of all of us, of your kindness and your wisdom, and also to just do a little plug that you're starting to teach Shantideva.
Oh, yes.
And a course next week. So could you tell that a little bit? Because
yeah. So thank you for reminding. So briefly, I'm starting a course on Shantideva from chapter 1 on. It will start this coming Tuesday, and it's the eve of Sakadawa this year. So it will meet every Tuesday and Saturday for 2 hours, but it will involve translation. So the idea is that after each class, within a day or two, especially Omar, who is always helping with the recording and the posting of this, we will post the video so that if you cannot attend a particular class and you want to attend the program in a kind of sequential way, there will be opportunity, time to watch the teaching before the next class. So the spacing of Tuesday and Saturday and the timing of the day is taking into consideration many different aspects. So 9 to 11 a.m. New York time reasonably works for people on the other side of the world, Singapore, Malaysia, China. Apparently there are some Chinese students who want to participate, so we are also aiming to translate that into Chinese. So Tuesday and Saturday are the 2 days, 9 to 11. So you can participate through Zoom. We are going to be sending out the Zoom information. If not already sent out, Javier is usually the one doing that. If you have registered, meaning given us your email at that page, then you should be getting the Zoom login information. So how long this will go, who knows? It's Shantideva's Bodhicharyavatara is kind of long. Yeah, so thank you. Then Khenchen Rinpoche, because of Nepal situation, he's going to probably be staying in the US for a little bit longer. So potentially we will hear more of what Rinpoche will be teaching coming up. So stay tuned with that. If you are not on the Drigong Kagyu Dharma Circle Medicine mailing list, you should get on it, because Linda and her team, often her team is basically her, but she keeps us all up to date on Rinpoche's different programs that will be coming up. Yeah. So the dedication we're going to do is this dedication, sometimes said to have been composed by Nagarjuna. It's the Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. And so in the commentaries for Bodhicharyavatara, it is said that this dedication prayer can also be a summary of the 10 chapters of Bodhicharyavatara. So Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, is taught in chapter 1. Where it has not arisen, may it arise, is covered in chapter 2, chapter 3. Where it has not arisen, may it arise, is chapter 2 and chapter 3. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, is chapter 4 and 5. And may it increase higher and higher, is 6, 7, 8, 9. 6, I think, also the patience, where it has arisen, may it not decline. Then 7, 8, 9, but ever increase higher and higher. Then dedication is dedication. So this Changju Semjo Rinpoche, very meaningful, because especially if we can remember, this is also reminding us of Shantideva's teachings, then it becomes very meaningful and very powerful. Changju Semjo Rinpoche Magye Banan Ge Gyuche Ge Banyam Pa Me Pa Ya Gone Gong Du Pelwer Sho. Okay, you all have a good weekend. Happy Mama's Day weekend. Yes, all mother sentient beings, but particularly those who have been our mothers this life. Don't forget to call them if you can call them. If you cannot call them, call some other mothers. Ta-da! Yes!
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Ciao for now.
Yeah.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Ta-ta.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Gracias.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.